There we go. Okay, awesome. So thank you all so much for coming. I know we have a really diverse group of people here today for Jane and Felicia. My name is Lou Chen. I'm the program manager for Trend Arts at Princeton, and I'm so excited to introduce you all to two members of our Trend Youth Theater team, faculty fellow Jane Cox, who also directs the program in theater at Princeton, as well as teacher partner Felicia Brown, who directs the theater program at Trenton Central High School. And so today they'll be giving us a wide-ranging and capacious and inspiring discussion on theater, and I'm so glad to be able to watch these two brilliant minds converse with each other. So with that, Jane, I'll hand it over to you, but real fast with regarding questions, please submit them throughout the conversation in the chat as they come up. And Jane may bring a couple up to ask Felicia. If we don't get your questions right away, we'll answer them at the very end. We'll have about 15 minutes or more dedicated to questions. But yeah, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Jane, over to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lou. And thank you, Pace Center. And thank you, Trenton Youth Theater. It's so lovely to see everyone here today. And my mom is here and Felicia's sister is here. So I'm very excited about that. And lots of wonderful people. Victoria David John, who is the director of the Trenton Youth Theater program, is here too. I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement and then we'll dive in. As members of the Princeton community, we acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of the Lenape tribes, past, present, and future. We aspire to show appreciation, respect, and concern for all Indigenous peoples and for our environment. We honor the Lenape and other Indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters, the elders who lived here before us, the Indigenous today, and generations to come. So I've known Felicia for a short amount of time, and we've never had a chance to meet in person yet because our Trenton Youth Theater program is pretty new. But I've already know she's just an astonishing human being. I think a lot of people here today probably know the many hats she wears as a director, producer, educator, activist, member of all possible boards in the state of New Jersey, and community organizer. And in the brief time we've known each other, I've already seen her like organize a huge group of artistic and educational leaders and talk us through the extremely complex organization of managing careers in technical education in the state of New Jersey. And I've also seen her wearing a sailor's cap, like emceeing a virtual student project. And I've just seen how much joy and inspiration and enthusiasm Felicia brings to everything she does. So I'm so delighted. I feel like we're getting to sit down. We were talking earlier about a shared interest in Irish traditional music. I feel like we're getting to sit down for the first time today to kind of just chat about Felicia and her life and the inspiring work that she does. And there was an anecdote, there's a story that came up, Felicia, today while we were chatting with Lou right before we let everybody in, about you talking to your kids this week and like the tunes that you use for your classes. Would you be willing to share that story with everyone here?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So I have started, a few months ago, I started using musical theater songs to start off each class as a way to pump the kids up, to pump me up, and also to give them just a little bit of musical theater history while we're in the process of everything else that they need to learn in class. And so this week I decided to pull from Hamilton. Some of the kids have been asking, they were like, when are you going to do Hamilton? When are you going to do Hamilton? And so I decided to do it this week. Normally, I only do 2 songs from a show, but the kids love Hamilton and so do I. And so the song I played today was One Last Time, which actually has an excerpt of George Washington's letter that he wrote saying goodbye to being president. And in this current environment and what we're dealing with and everything, I was like, I want them to hear the words of the very first president and what he felt about his role. Now, granted, he knew he was a man of flaws, and he says that in his letter. But that he also hoped that he did something good. And so we had this fabulous conversation for just a few minutes because our kids are right in the capital of New Jersey. And of course, everything is hitting home for them right now. And so this was a beautiful way to kind of just take this absolutely fabulous song from musical theater and show how you can still bring to life history in a different way for people. I know I hadn't heard the letter until the first time I heard it from Hamilton, and I had always had my own mixed feelings about George Washington because he was a slave owner. But there was something about this letter, and of course the way that Christopher Jackson sings it, that every time I hear it, it brings tears to my eyes.
Beautiful. Thank you. You know, I realized, I don't know if everybody here knows, so let me just say, Felicia runs the theater program at Trenton Central High School, among the million other things that I mentioned. And we have a Saturday morning program directed by Victoria David John, who's here today. Hi, Victoria. Where the Trenton students work with Princeton students, and Princeton faculty fellows, and Victoria, who's an alum, directs it. And we've been doing that virtually for the first time in the fall. We're going to do it in the spring, and then hopefully in this coming fall, we'll be able to do it in person. So Felicia, I want to ask you the question I always like to ask theater artists in the beginning of conversations, which is, what are the things that first captured your imagination about theater when you were young?
Okay, this is a story that's become like traditional in my family. So it all happened when I was a little girl watching a church production called Salty 3. So Salty was singing songbook, and it was, they had a bunch of kids up on the stage who were playing the various characters, and then Salty and his wife Saltina were played by two people who were teachers at the school where I was. I knew some of the kids who were up on the stage, and I got down out of my seat, walked over to my mom, tapped her on the leg and said, I want to be up there. And my mom was like, okay, when you're older, go sit down. And the next year I was in Salty 4 as a church mouse. And honestly, it was something that just got me. I think the two things that hit me the most was, one, I was seeing people I knew take on these other characters. Like, all of a sudden, my friend Chris was now Rhythm, Salty's little son, on the drums, you know. And it was the storytelling aspect of theater, that idea that for a few moments we can all be taken into this other world. And yeah, and I still sing Salty songs to this day. Yeah, I do.
You know, I'm so tempted to ask you to do one now, but I won't. Is this still what keeps you going, doing theater with the many, many hats that you wear?
I will say, okay, so yes and no. So here's the thing. When it comes to dealing with people you know, there are great things about it, but then there's also difficult things about it. So I have worked with people and it's been fabulous. Then I've worked with other people who maybe they knew me growing up and weren't too quite sure of like what I was capable of. And so there were a lot of roadblocks. So there's that aspect, but I still love doing pieces with people I know, because when you've gotten with a group of people and you've connected, there's something beautiful and wonderful about it. Especially like, I love moments when there's a whole group of people on stage and you're all hitting this note, and you're just like, yes, we just did that. There's something fabulous about it. Or even sitting as a director and watching something take shape that has only been in your head for 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden it's there. But I also love that storytelling aspect. Still, I think the cool thing now is that I'm much more fascinated in how the storytelling helps us understand each other. And I didn't get that as a kid. I didn't understand that element of the storytelling. And now I do, and I appreciate storytelling on a much different level.
Well, that's really interesting. You know, you're such a tireless advocate for arts in the schools. I know you have this, you're heading up this new, right, this new initiative, Theater in Our Schools.
So yeah, it's not quite, okay, I will say it's been around for at least, I don't know, it's been around for a while. I think it started in the 90s. The American Alliance for Theater and Education, I'm the regional programming director. So I sit on the board and I head up what's called Theater in Our Schools, working alongside with the Educational Theater Association. So yeah, I'm rolling it out in a new way this year.
So I just to sort of follow up on what you said, because I think that's so interesting. Like, you got excited about theater when you were a kid because of the sort of joy and pleasure of watching other people, you know, become other people and becoming another person or a mouse yourself. And then starting to think about the other roles that theater maybe plays in the community. So I'm curious about, just to start a conversation, I want to circle back to your life. I have lots more questions about sort of how you ended up doing all these many things, but I'd love to start a conversation about what do you think theater education at the secondary school level can do, like both on maybe on a group level or for individual students, or like wherever you want to take that.
Okay. So as my students will tell you, and most people who've ever heard me talk about theater, I am prone to saying theater is in everything and everything is in theater. I say it like all the time. The kids are like, yes, ma'am. Yes, Miss Brown, we know. But that's because when I think about what theater education can do, especially for high schoolers, there's so many benefits. I have seen it help students with confidence. Kids who were extremely shy and didn't feel like they could ever even step up in class and do their class presentation. Getting them first roped in as an ensemble person, and then all of a sudden watching them grow and they start being the soloist in the show. That kind of stuff is beautiful. You watch these students blossom in their confidence in who they are and what they're capable of doing. There's a sense of community that begins to happen also. We had this beautiful moment in one of my classes today where the students have been working on writing monologues and small scenes. And one of the students wasn't to a point where she really wanted to share hers yet, though everyone had read their pieces. And the class just all around her were like, hey, you can do it. We support you. You're going to be fine. And she's like, I don't know. It feels like it's part of who I am. And another student said, it's all right. I just poured my whole heart out. You saw all my trauma on the page, and you can do it too. And it was just beautiful watching them all just support this student and show her this love and this bond. They were like, we're together in this. You're not alone in this. And that is so important because as teenagers, teenagers have the tendency to think they are alone in what they're facing. It is something I know I personally went through and struggled in my teenage years, is feeling that you're alone, that no one really gets you. And so there's a sense of community that I believe happens with theater education on the high school level. Now, granted, it also depends on who's handling the program.
Right.
And they are noticing certain things because it is high school, and high school can also turn a whole different way and not be supportive. But I've seen a lot of awesome theater programs in schools that have been quite the opposite and have just loved on people. That's beautiful.
Amazing. That feels like a good chance to circle back to one of the things I want to ask about you, which is, you know, you're an actor, you're a director, you're a producer, you're a stage manager, you're a dramaturg, and obviously also an educator and a mentor and a community organizer. So like, how did it happen? Is this just in your bones to sort of be involved in everything, or like, how did that play out?
You know, it's funny because I am what I call an introvert who's forced to be an extrovert because of the talent and giftings I have.
Uh-huh.
Like, honestly, I was the kind of girl who wanted to be a computer chemist in a lab, left alone with my chemicals. That's what I wanted to be. And then that kind of shifted and changed. And honestly, the different opportunities that came about really were because of the people who were in my life and just connecting with them. My mentor, the late Mark Hallen, who was a professor at Eastern University, he took me under his wing. I didn't think I had any talent. I mean, I had done my little church productions and stuff like that, but that was it. I've never really had any major roles in anything. And then I went to Eastern University, saw the work of Mark Hallen, and was like, there's no way I'm auditioning for this man because he's beyond brilliant. So I decided instead to audition for this really tiny little Italian lady who was doing the musicals. And I was like, I'll go work with her. But he came into my final audition and saw something in me, told Teresa, who was the director, you need to cast her. And then he started asking me, well, what is it that you want to do? You know, and he knew that I wanted to go back to my former school and restart productions there, because they used to do school-wide productions where I used to teach before, and that dropped away right before I got into high school there. And so he started giving me opportunities. And it was there that because I was into acting, but he was like, all right, let's teach you some directing stuff. We're doing a little summer camp. So now you're the instructor. And then when the head of communications was like, hey, I'm organizing a group of people to go to Costa Rica, and I need some people to teach various aspects of the arts. Do you have a theater teacher who can go? And Mark said, Felicia. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I can't do that. And he's like, you can, you will. And so that opened the door for me to teach. I had done part of my student teaching in Kenya, but it opened the door for me to teach in Costa Rica twice and in Brazil. And then also with Dr. Corbett, I went to Egypt and sang, and it opened up these other avenues. And one of the things that Mark instilled inside of me was a thing inside that said, basically, just because I don't get in a show doesn't mean I can't be part of the show. And so there was a show he did, Balkan Women, Jules Tasca. And we had it, Jules was still working on the piece while we had it for our school. And I could not audition because at the time I was ill when the auditions happened. And Mark was like, hey, you still want to be involved? And I was like, sure. So that year I became the assistant director, the costume designer, and the dramaturg and the assistant to the Russian martial art instructor, all in 1 year. And so I think that allowed me to go, hey, you don't have to just do one thing in theater. Theater has so many different avenues, and you just try it and see. You might find out you have a talent in an area that you didn't know you had a talent in before.
You know, Carolyn Little just put in the chat, our world would be so dark, Felicia, if you had gone a different route. We're so lucky you turned towards theater.
Oh, Carolyn, now I will say this because Carolyn is the New Jersey chapter director for Thespians, which is the honor society for theater students in middle school and high school. And she does a fabulous job. And we have our Thespian Festival this weekend. So I am so happy and honored that she was able to take some time out because I know it's crazy getting ready for the festival.
Amazing. Thanks for coming, Carolyn. That's awesome. I want to ask you about this. You know, I was looking over your bio and you just brought some of it up. You know, you've been all over the world with theater.
Yeah.
How has doing this international theater work, I know you've taught in a lot of different countries for short periods of time, like how has that work affected your relationship? Is there anything you want to share, or any story or anecdote or anything about those experiences?
I will say it definitely opens your eyes. Definitely opens your eyes. So in both Costa Rica and Brazil, I worked with street children who were taken and then put into a place of safety, a place where they can get educated. When I went to Costa Rica the second time, I was actually working with former child prostitutes, and using theater as a way to give them their voice back. My youngest one was 11 years old, and she had been in it since she was 9. She was sold into it. And so when you're dealing with those kind of situations and also seeing a confidence come about in those kids, it definitely opens your eyes. Same thing with Brazil. My work in Slovakia has a different kind of take. It opens my eyes in a different way. So I'm connected to the Slovak Theater Institute. I have a standing invitation to their Nova Drama Festival, which I have attended twice. And one of the things that I've realized and learned is that there's so much we don't know. There's so much that we don't know about each other. And theater gives you an opportunity to find out more about each other in a way that can happen in a short period of time. You know, you can sit down and watch a production done by a group of people about some aspect of their own history and life. And all of a sudden, there's an understanding that takes place that you did not have before, that you could have tried to read in a book and get, but you would not have got it the same way. And I felt this way, especially watching this play, which translates to 7 days to a funeral. And it was about an author whose works had been banned during communism, and how his own wife, that was the case, and then his wife had died, and how the government had specifically made it so he could not get people to come to his wife's funeral because they were afraid of being associated with her. And just like this beautiful play, and it goes back and forth from this guy's memories with his wife to these moments of feeling that oppression. Just beautiful pieces that I would not have gotten if I just read a history book and was like, okay, let me get this. So that's for me.
Thank you for sharing those stories. You know, I know that you're involved in anti-racist work on multiple levels, in various organizations and on boards and diversity committees and all kinds of things. I want to invite you to talk a little bit about that, and I also want to open a conversation about maybe what some of the specific ways that you think anti-racism can or should manifest in a high school theater program or a college theater program. So we can take that in whatever order makes sense for you.
Okay. And guide me back if I don't answer completely everything you
Totally.
Okay. All right. So my connection, for those of you who are not aware, I am a part of the EDIA, which is Equity, Diversity, Inclusivity, and Accessibility Committee for the American Alliance for Theater and Education. I am a part of a advisory group for DEI. You'll find that everyone just moves initials around for it. For DEI, for the Educational Theater Association. I am a IAED mentor for the Association for Career and Technical Education. And then I also run a community organization of Christians who specifically are focused on anti-racism. And this group is called SOAR. It started when I was in Eastern University, and I had left it there and thought that it, had moved on. But when things happened last summer, I felt compelled to call upon the former SOAR members and start our group anew. And now, instead of standing for, we used to be called Students Organized Against Racism. Now we are standing openly against racism is what we stand for. So, that's just to let you all know what Jane is referencing when she's involved in all these things. So when I look at this, and specifically at theater education and how this is playing out, one of the things that I'm constantly hearing a lot of places is the idea of I can never say this right. It's basically taking the canon and looking at it and going, we need to decolonize. There we go. Decolonize it. We have the tendency of, in education, the majority of the works tend to be white men. Mm-hmm. That's just how it tends to be white men. And it's odd because what is normally taught for theater history is that theater really kind of started with the Greeks. But if you really look back, it started a whole lot, way before the Greeks, because people were storytelling. People have been storytelling since the beginning of time. And what better way to storytell than to get up and start performing it while you're telling this story? So theater has been around. It might have been written down into actual script form, but it has been around for a long time. And many cultures have kept that tradition. And so I think what we have is a lot of people kind of going, all right, do we have these written forms that we can then draw from and go, this is a part of theater history that needs to be acknowledged, that Black theater is more than just a Raisin in the Sun and Fences. Those are the two that tend to be taught. Looking, and I mean, you hardly ever read Native American theater at all in school. Very little Hispanic, and there's only one major Asian playwright that anyone even knows about. And I'm like, but they're out there. They're out there. These writings have been around for years. There have been people who've been a part of this for years. So there's this whole now look to go, how do we embody these other voices? I also see that in schools is the best place to break down that wall when it comes to casting. Unfortunately, we have this concept where it's like, no, people are going to want to see it a certain way. But see, in school, you can really break that wall down. Don't worry, they'll face it in life. I've faced it in life, but I think that was one of the things that got me about Mark Hallen. I came in the very first production I saw was The Crucible, and he had set it in a prison camp, and which allowed him the flexibility to cast according to real talent, to the talent that people had and who could do what. And so Elizabeth Proctor was Black. and Tituba was white.
Mm-hmm.
I learned, outside of outside of college, that it's very rare that you're going to find that, though it did happen on Broadway. But it can happen in school. It can happen in school because you're supposed to be there to help the students become the best that they can be in the talent that they have. And so if that means that this one particular student who happens to have a certain color skin is still the best person to play this character, regardless of how it's been traditionally cast, then let that person go on and play it. Because you already know as an adult teacher that they're most likely not going to be able to play that character somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So why shouldn't you be the one to give them that opportunity and watch them fly?
I feel like we, as someone teaching in third level education, I feel like we are constantly navigating harm that has been done in high school theater programs, around the very issues you speak of, and also often around musical theater, which the sort of traditional canon has so many racist and sexist tropes built into it. Like, do you have any, I'd love to just have you in all the theater secondary schools in the country, because I feel like sometimes a theater program in a university is like the first job is to like try to undo some of the harm that has happened in high schools, and a lot of students of color have been turned off of theater in high school, because like I know there was in Princeton a couple of years ago, they did because I grew up in Ireland, it's my excuse that I don't know the musical Anything Goes. I know it's a classic American musical, I don't know it, but I do know that there's two like stereotyped Chinese characters in it, and I do know that they did that in the Princeton high school, like without thinking about it, and cast Chinese students in those stereotyped roles. And an enormous amount of harm was done, and probably many of those students won't touch theater when they go to college for that reason. Anyway, so I don't mean to go off on a rant, but I think about it a lot. Yeah. And do you have any like strategies for dealing with the musical? Like, how do you approach the musical? In plays, I feel like, there's a fair amount of accessible information out there if you have the time and resources to look for it, which a lot of high school theater teachers don't. But if you did, there's accessible information about quote unquote straight plays. But what about musicals?
Okay, I will say this, musicals are tricky. And part of it is because people go for the names that they know because they know it's going to draw an audience. So that's how they do it. A lot of high school programs are financed by their musical production. And so they need to be able, they need to be able to bring people in and so they pick the shows that they know will bring people. Unfortunately, that is where it gets tricky because
so as usual, capitalism is the problem.
Yeah, it really is. And it's one of those things where people have to go, and sometimes it's out of your hands. Sometimes it's the administration that makes a call. Sometimes the administration will tell you what show you're going to do. Sometimes they will have a certain limit on what shows that you can do. And sometimes they really say, okay, look, if you don't make X amount of money with your program's getting cut. Wow. So when you have things like that happen, yeah, it becomes tricky because you're like, how do I do a show that allows for it? But I think what happens is there really needs to be an awareness because there are shows out there. Mm-hmm. There are beautiful, powerful shows that can be done and you can cast them any way, shape, or form. And it's just a matter of really taken the time to think about it and go, all right, how do we make this work? It does get tricky because, yes, theater teachers are swamped. In a lot of cases, you have teachers who aren't even actually trained to be theater teachers, but were English teachers and then moved into theater. I know when I was coming through college that theater education was not a major you could find a lot of places. So when I majored at Eastern, I majored with English with communications for secondary education, and then double minored in music and theater. All with the hope that I could get into teaching English and then be able to run a theater program. So you have, that's quite often the case. I know that's the case. Carolyn Little, she was an English teacher also, who has now fully theater teacher, yay.
Yes.
But I know that that's one of the struggles that tends to be the case, is that you're coming from this other avenue and then you're like, how do I get this program going? How do I keep this program going? Because there's an expectation from the administrators. And if you don't meet certain things, is your program gonna get cut? Now, here in New Jersey, that shouldn't be as much of an issue because it is supposed to be, that all students across the state of New Jersey, if you attend a public school, you are supposed to have access to every single aspect of the arts. That is what it's supposed to be in the state of New Jersey. We're not quite there. No. We are there, but we're not quite there yet. And especially right now, when we look at the situation with a lot of budget cuts, as what's happening with the economic situation in our country, of course, the first place people tend to look is at the arts. And for some reason, they tend to cut theater before they cut other arts, which I don't understand, since theater actually embodies all the other arts. So if you kept theater, you would have a way to kind of still have all the other arts involved without losing them. So.
Yeah. I have a million more questions, but I see people here who are going to have brilliant questions and maybe responses to some of the things. So I would take a moment right now and see if any of the brilliant people on this call have anything they want to ask you about, so I don't hog all the time. And feel free, Victoria, Maddie, Carolyn, feel free to just, pop up and say something. Prove to me you didn't wander off and put toast in.
Hi, I just wanted to say hello. I would love to know what has been perhaps one of the most or one or two most rewarding stories from this Zoom time in the midst of not knowing what theater might become or what theater might be in the professional landscape as you are, teaching your kids. Would love to hear some stories about that.
Okay, good stories about teaching via Zoom. I will say this because it is, I tell people this all the time, that we're in theater and all that's really happened is that our stage has changed. So I think one of the beautiful things that I'm seeing happen is creativity in a new kind of expression. This week, and I was just telling my mom this, and I think I mentioned to you before, Victoria, that my students had started writing these pieces. Okay, so at the end of the school year, at the end of 2020, December 18th, and we're about to go on a winter break. I was like, you know what, kids, this is what we're gonna do. Monologue of 2020. And I basically told them, you know, I gave them 2 minutes to just write down any words or phrases that came to mind. I gave them another minute to write down people that came to mind for 2020. And then I was like, pick a person, pick 3 to 5 words that go with that person, and then give them an audience and write a monologue. Well, this week, and I haven't had a chance to tell Victoria this yet. So this week, we had the students reading each other's works out loud, cold reads. Okay. Oh my goodness. The very first one that we read, like, we all got chills. Like, we were all just at this emotional level of just like, oh my goodness, that was so good. and it was because these kids took what they were processing for this whole past year, you know, and found this way to word it into this beautiful, powerful monologue that another student could pick up. It was in the perfect format so that the student could read it and perform it cold. We are looking to do a dramatic reading of several of those works later this year because the kids want to tweak them and work on them. But oh my goodness, there was like piece after piece after piece that just blew us all away. And we were just, I mean, like, we really were having like this moment like, oh my goodness, this is so powerful and awesome and moving in a way that we had not experienced in person.
That's amazing.
Right.
Maddie, since I made you turn your camera, I have 2 great questions in the chat that I'll go to next. But Maddie, since I made you turn your camera on, thank you, Carolyn, Maddie, Victoria. Is there anything particular you wanted to ask?
Hi, this has been such a joy to listen in on. I would like to kind of go back to what Jane was mentioning about high school theaters and musicals in particular. I think I mean, I was very lucky to have a very supportive theater environment in high school, but I know it's definitely like being in college, it's been very eye-opening to see a whole new repertoire and canon. So I was just kind of wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about how we can continue to kind of branch out at an earlier stage for like theater makers all across the world.
I'll say this, wow, just make sure you're connected with other people in theater and people who are above you, who know things. So I will say, I'm so thankful I've been a part of the American Alliance for Theater and Education. We've actually just started a mentoring program as well, where we are pairing people who have been in the industry for decades with people who are fairly new, and going, hey, this is someone who can help you. We also have started a mentorship specifically for leaders of color in theater, where it's like, hey, you need somebody to help you along and help you find out things and really feel like you have a place in this. And then other organizations, the Theater Communications Group has been phenomenal lately in really trying to make sure that people are finding out about other playwrights of color who are out there. There's like this whole beautiful movement that is happening right now where people are really starting to go, hey, we need to be aware. We need to be aware. And you're finding that in a lot of these organizations. I know even with the Educational Theater Association, that they're trying to do that and bring that into the high school environment, and approach their festivals with that in mind. As they're looking for their other one, there's a huge event that's happening where they're recognizing Kenny Leon and honoring him, which, oh my goodness, I had a chance to hear him speak at their event last summer. And if there's someone who I wish I could just like sit in the space with him and just let him pour wisdom on me, it is Kenny Leon. But yeah, I would say find someone you can grab a hold of, and that is tricky because you're like, well, who? And I will say this: you have some awesome people right at Princeton, some absolutely amazing people at Princeton University in the theater program. I believe one of your newer hires was the one who did Finish the Fight, correct? If I'm not mistaken. Oh, I'm trying to remember.
I should know, but I gotta no. Keep talking.
Just recently, like I heard that she joined Princeton this year. And she is the one who did the play Finish the Fight. I cannot remember her name, but I think she's the one who directed it. Which if you have not watched Finish the Fight, first off, that's a piece you need to watch.
Oh, Whitney. Yes. It's Whitney White. Yes, Whitney White. Yes, she is. Yeah, she is part of our community and a guest artist and is hopefully teaching a class next year. Yeah.
Yeah, she's that piece. If you haven't watched it, everyone on here, if you haven't watched it, it's on YouTube. It's free. It's through the New York Times. It's a whole thing about women of color who are part of the suffrage movement. Powerful. And they made it a point to have various women of color. So you have Black women, you have an Asian American, you have a Native American, you have a Hispanic American, all of these women who we should have known. Absolutely powerful, powerful piece that will hit you to the core. My students loved it. Yeah, but if there are people there who definitely will pour into you. I know they will, because I've met amazing people just in the meetings that I've had with people from Princeton and the theater community. I can't speak for everyone at Princeton, but I can speak for the artistic people I know from Princeton. And you've got a good bunch there with good hearts who are really trying to do something different. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. No, that was really helpful. I'm an aspiring educator, so that was really, really just like empowering. Thank you. And yes, the Princeton theater community is wonderful. Thanks, Jane.
Oh, thank you both. How lovely. I have some great other questions in the chat here. Elizabeth Hostetter, do you want to ask it yourself, Elizabeth? I can also read it out.
I love Elizabeth.
No, it's fine. You can just read it. It's fine. I'm sort of
okay. Elizabeth says, I'm so impressed with the range of work that you do. Me too. Atai seems to be a focus on young people. Is it more or less challenging than working with adults or professionals?
That's a good question. Okay. I find working with students, I'm much more forgiving working with students than I am working with adults. So when I'm working with them, I know that I'm in this training mode, that it's about training them, helping them. And yes, there are some that I want to shake and go, come on. But I truly enjoy working with them because there is that, there's that chance to help them shine. I think working with adults is so different. I enjoy working with adults on the level of the fact of working with people who are professionally trained, who already know what they're doing, but sometimes that can also be a hindrance. Sometimes some people are so into themselves that they forget about the collaborative nature of the piece that they're working on. But then you have these beautiful moments of collaboration that happen on the adult level that you could not have when it comes to the students, the younger students, because the younger students aren't on that level. So for instance, I remember the first time I got to see Sir Patrick Stewart on stage. He was in the Scottish play, and I was at a point in my life where I was about to give up on theater. I was. And I literally felt the love of theater come back into me because of how collaborative the piece was. That it wasn't about Sir Patrick Stewart, even though he was playing the title character. It was about the whole group. And there was something beautiful about watching these adults work together the way theater is supposed to be. And when that happens, that's on a level that like, I get chills about. So I love having those moments, but working with the kids is also different, because then I get chills about watching them all of a sudden connect.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's beautiful, because I also was inspired by Patrick Stewart when I saw him do Waiting for Godot with Ian McKellen.
Yes.
And the two of them, you know, you just go, oh, now that absurdism actually makes sense. But that's exactly what I was kind of getting at, is working with children is very exciting, but you don't get to explore those deeper things. And so how does that continue to stimulate you? And how do you take those really great ideas and then not dumb them down, but make them accessible to younger people? It's pretty good.
It does get tricky, because I realize that it depends on my class. So certain classes I realize will not be able to get all the nuances of certain pieces. Whereas there's other classes where I'm like, okay, this class, we can take them and do this with this class because this is different. We're at that point right now in talking with McCarter Theater and the Audrine Kennedy Festival that is happening. And which works are we showing to which groups of kids? Because not all of them are going to be able to get Audrine Kennedy's work. You know, some of them won't be able to get it. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm a part of all these other organizations that deal with the adults, is because sometimes I need to still have those kind of conversations and keep those juices flowing. Because, yeah, there are times when I'm dealing with the kids and I'm like, oh, I want to talk on this kind of level. And I know they're not there yet. So, yeah. And then I get in a group with people who are much more advanced than I am. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel like nothing in here. Just pour your wisdom.
Thank you.
They should take their wisdom from you, Felicia. That's what I think.
Kind.
There's a lovely question at sort of the other end of the spectrum here. Tim, shall I read it out? Or do you want to ask it?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll jump on and ask. Hi, Felicia.
Hi, Tim.
I think you know already that I am a huge fan of yours, and not you, the artist, or you, the creative, but you, the person. I think you're amazing.
Thank you, Tim.
And so my question was really about, so for those of us who may have, when we were younger, had some theater aspirations that weren't really encouraged or cultivated, and in some cases were literally discouraged, and we find ourselves in this totally different space that we never imagined ourselves being in, but still have that itch, so to speak. Where do we go to just kind of be involved in theater, even though it's not necessarily our profession at this point, but just something that we're still really interested in?
Okay, my first thing I'm going to say is check to see if you have a community theater near you. A lot of community theaters are trying to do virtual performances, and they're looking for cast, and they're looking for people who are willing to do stuff. I sit on the board for the Ritz Theater Company in South Jersey, and we're getting ready to do a little piece called The Diner Plays, where they just asked me to direct one of the little scenes, and I have to find 3 women, one with short hair that possibly has a wig at home, because of the fact that one of my characters has to have been someone who can take the wig off and show that she has the shorter hair because she faced cancer. And so this particular theater, they had 3 playwrights who have done works for them in the past, and they asked them, hey, can you write a small scene? And we'll just have random people play these little parts. So I would say definitely check with your community theaters, because yeah, they're always looking for people, and right now they're hurting. And so trying to find these little performances that they can do online, because they're also trying to save whatever little money they have. That's a good place to start. And then if you're creative, which I know you are, Tim is from Eastern University, and he now heads up the alumni over there and is producing his own music, which has a song called Bye Felicia. But it's not about me. So, but one of the cool things is that, like you're doing, you can, for other people who are out there, now is the time for you to shine even on your own. I was telling one of my students who's graduated, I was like, look, start your own YouTube channel. Now's the time for, if you write stuff, write it and perform it. Get a little following going. Let people know. I'm actually considering it for myself, for my singing. And that idea of going, now is the time, because people are sitting at home needing entertainment, and some of them are getting sick of whatever they see on TV. And you can easily build a following right now. So now is the time. I tell people all the time, incubate, do not hibernate during this pandemic. This is your chance to grow into something awesome and beautiful that can take the world by storm in a good way.
Wow. I love that. And I think I'm going to segue into a final question, which kind of, spins off of Tim's question, which is that this pause in live performance has offered us all an opportunity to reflect on theater making in the universities and the schools and the professional theater. And you want to leave us with 1 or 2 thoughts about what you'd most like to see changed about theater in this country. You could be educational, could be professional, community theater, like.
It's interesting because both Julie Cohen from the Educational Theater Association and Sarah from McCarter Theater, the new, I'm not going to try and pronounce her last name because I always say it wrong, the new head of McCarter, both asked me that question recently. And what I would love to see is theater not come back exactly the same way. I would love to see theater more inclusive. And when I say inclusive, I'm not just talking about on the diversity scope of people of color, but I'm talking about, are we paying attention to people who are on various levels of the spectrum? Are we paying attention to people with various levels of physical ability? The fact that we've only really had one Broadway winner in a wheelchair, Tony Winner, like that shouldn't be. We should be at a point that we're starting to see all the people that we see in life should be people that we're seeing in theater, because theater is a replica of life. And so why should it be that only a small voice is being heard when there's so many other people? So I want to see that in education. I want to see that in the professional world. I want to see that across all avenues of the arts, that people start realizing that that there are voices there, and that there's room at the table for us all. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just so incredible to be around the enthusiasm and love and inspiration that you bring to theater making and education. So thank you so much for taking the time to share some of that wisdom with us. Really beautiful.
Thank you. This has been great. And we will at some point sit in a pub and sing Irish songs, because you guys all missed that before, but when I found out she's Irish, I was like, yes! Way too many Irish songs for my own good. So
Amazing.
thank you all for being here. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
We should have play out music, but we don't, because I never really figured out how to do that. But thank you all.
Yay. Oh,
Thanks
Noelle.
everyone for coming. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful day and weekend.
I love watching everybody pop off. Wendy, my mom, so good to see you.
Bye, Jane's mom.
Great listening in, Felicia.
Thank you. I will be in touch with you because I've got some children's books that need to be illustrated. And yeah,